Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with the next update for my A to Z project pan. If you have been following this project along, you know that I am panning one eyeshadow starting from A all the way down to Z. So that's basically what the gist of this project is. It's obviously inspired by the kind of regular project A to Z, but I took it and made it an eyeshadow edition. So my goal is to pan on all of the eyeshadows and I'm just going to go through where I am with all of them. But before I jump into the first eyeshadow, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. But let's just jump into the video. So since the last update, I have actually started putting the list down below with where I am with all the eyeshadows. So if you kind of want to have an overview, you can look there. But obviously I will go through all of the eyeshadows that I had pan on this month, but I will skip over the ones that I already had pan on. So we are going to start with the eyeshadow in the place of A, and that comes from my Amrezy palette from Anastasia, and it is the shade Anastasia. So with this shade, I have used it an additional 2 times this past month, and I'm actually happy to report that I did hit pan on this eyeshadow, so you can see that right there. In total, it took me 9 uses to pan on it, so it didn't take too long, but I feel like this is more of a kind of crumbly formula from Anastasia, but it was a beautiful shade. I really enjoyed it, and I used it in quite a lot of looks, and it was also a shade that I used quite kind of spread out throughout the month. I didn't like focus all of those uses in 1 month. I did actually use it in total like 4 out of the 6 months, so that's pretty good, and I'm happy to have another pan in this palette as well as in this project. And with that eyeshadow is actually the last one that I have in here that I was working on, so this one will now roll out of the project, so I have another palette rolling kind of or being finished in this project. So the next one I'm going to talk about is C. So C comes from my Sultry palette, and that is the shade Cyborg. So this is kind of like a silver shade, and I actually haven't used this shade in the past month, so no new uses, and in total I only have 2 uses on it, which is this shade right here. So as you can see, there's a little bit of dip, but no pan and obviously no movement since the last month. Then for E, we have a shade from my Subculture palette. There's going to be a lot of Anastasia palettes in here, but I did kind of consciously put them in here because I knew they were easier to pan on than for some Colourpop palettes, and since I have so many pans that I want to hit this year, I wanted to kind of give myself a little bit of a break with this project. So that's why there's so many Anastasia palettes. But like I said, E comes from this palette, and it is the shade Electric, and I did use this an additional 1 time in the past month, and this is what it looks like now. So no pan, and I do have 4 uses on it, but you can definitely see the dip, and I think that if I focus in on it more and use it more than 1 time, I think I should definitely be able to pan on this in the next month. But since it is such a beautiful shade, I kind of am savoring this a little bit, and I'm not in a rush to pan on it. So we'll see if it happens next month, and if it doesn't, I'm not worried about it because I know this will definitely be a shade that I can hit pan on this year. For G, we have another one that I haven't touched this past month, and that is the shade Ginger from the Aina palette. This is what the shade looks like right there, and I haven't used it, but I do have 6 uses on it in total from prior months, but as you can see, no movement from last month, and I'm fine with that. This is a shade that I think I'm going to reach for a lot when we get to autumn, because this is like a really kind of warm, almost rusty orange, and I think that's going to be beautiful to use when we do get to that kind of season. But for now I'm using slightly kind of brighter shades than this, so that's why I haven't used this in the past month. So for H, we have the shade HWY from my Mar palette. So this is not originally the HWY shade, but I did kind of franken 2 palettes together, and this one ended up in that spot, so that's why I'm using it in this project. But I did use the shade an additional 1 time, so I do have 3 uses on it total, but as you can see, I do not have pan yet, but I'm slowly building a dip in this. But as you know, colourful pans are quite deep, so we'll see how long this will take, and I think I should focus on this more now because it is a really summery shade. But I've had a lot of other shimmery shades that I've been focusing on before, and this just didn't quite go with them, so that's why I haven't put that much effort into this one yet. But I think this will be one that I will try to focus more on in the upcoming month, just because we are simply in summer, and this kind of orange with almost like a gold yellow shift is the perfect shade to use in the season. So next shade I have is another kind of more autumn shade, so I haven't used this in the past month. That is the shade Jester from Makeup Geek. I have 3 uses on it in total, but yeah, no pan yet obviously, and no movement, so 3 uses. But again, I think this is one that I will reach for more when we get to those kind of autumn months, because for me this is definitely a shade that screams that season. So yeah, I just been focusing on some other shades, and again, this wasn't really a shade that inspired me this past month, but I'm not too worried about it because I know that these full eyeshadows from Makeup Geek, although they are quite deep, since I don't know, since they're also creamy and like you kind of have to build them up a little bit, at least since they are getting a little bit older, I'm not too worried again about hitting pan on this, but who knows, it might take me longer than I expect, but we'll see when I start focusing on this one. For M, we have a shade from my Soft Glam palette, and that is the shade Mulberry. And with Mulberry, I used this an additional 14 times in the past month, which is quite a lot. And in total, I have used this 38 times, and I am happy to report that I was able to pan on this. And I'm hoping you can see that it's actually like a little double pan, and it's the first time ever that I hit a pan like this, where it's not like one solid pan, it's just two kind of small baby pans next to each other. I'm sure that if I use it one more time, that kind of will meld into one pan, but I haven't used it since I pan on it, because I've been focusing on other deeper shades. And yeah, I just thought it would be fun to show you that kind of double pan, because it is quite funny to me, but I'm sure that pan will expand quite quickly when I use it another time. And yeah, like I said, I used this 38 times, which is probably eyeshadow has taken me the longest to pan on this year, so that was definitely a challenge. And I'm panning enough the shade in here, which you might know, and I'm going to get to that. Let's just go to it now actually, because there is one shade in between, but it's the shade O, which is Orange Soda, and that is the shade here. And as you can see, I might have a little bit of a dip in it, but I have used it 12 times in the past month and 12 times in total, and I'm really worried that will take me a long time, because yeah, it's just, I don't feel like I have enough of a dip with so many uses, so I'm worried about this shade. But if I just continue using it, I think that I probably will hit pan on it eventually, but it will just take a long time. So the shade that was in between those was obviously N, and that comes from my Subculture palette again, and that is the shade New Wave. And New Wave I have used 4 times in the past month, and it is a beautiful kind of, I always say creamsicle kind of orangey shade. It's beautiful. With this one I used it 6 times in total, and I definitely think this again will be a shade that I will focus a lot on in the upcoming month, because it is like a really nice summer shade, and I think this will pair really nicely with those kind of warmer tone looks that I'm planning to do in the next month. So next up we have the shade Q, which is my Queen Bee shade from my Aha Honey palette, and it's a shade that I actually reached for a little bit this past month. I reached for it 5 times, so in total now I have 9 uses, and you can see that there is a little bit of a dip starting to form. So this is actually one of the shades that I reached for quite often in the past month. I mean, 5 uses isn't amazing, but if you know the amount of eyeshadows that I'm panning, 5 is pretty decent. And I do think I'm still quite far away from pan, but maybe in the next month or maybe in the next 2 months I should have pan on this if I continue focusing on it. But it's been a beautiful shade, and it's been easy to incorporate with other kind of looks, and it's also a shade that's quite easy to incorporate with neutral looks, and you kind of using this as a pop of kind of more gold or more yellow, so that's kind of how I'll be using it as well. So yeah, 5 uses on this month, and I'm not too worried about this, but I'm still a decent way away from pan. So for R, we have another shade that I've been using quite a lot this past month, and that is the shade Raw Sienna from my Modern Renaissance palette, again from Anastasia. With this one I used it 16 times in the past month for a total of 24 uses, and there you see that I do have another kind of baby pan. I'm very excited to have it pan on this, because again it took me quite a long time, but since this is more of a crease shade, I used I think more of this than I did, for example, the Mulberry shade from the Soft Glam palette, which is why this one didn't take as long. And also I think I did have a bit more of usage on this one, and my Modern Renaissance is starting to look very loved. I have 8 pans in this palette now, which I'm so happy about. I don't really think that I'm too close to hitting pan on anything else though, so we'll see if I do hit pan on anything else this year. But with 8 pans, I'm still really happy with what this palette is looking like. For S, it's another shade that I haven't used this past month. That is the shade Sponsored, again from my Aina palette. That is what this one looks like, and I only used this twice, and that was kind of in the first month of this project. But it is a beautiful shade, but I'm kind of savoring this for, I think, again, more kind of autumny looks, and also it is a beautiful eyeshadow, and I just don't really want to waste it sitting at home. So that's really why I haven't reached for this, but I'm sure I will hit pan on this eyeshadow throughout this year. So for you, we have my last shade from my Subculture palette. I am panning quite a few shades in here, and that is the shade Untamed. And Untamed is this shade right here, and I actually haven't used this month. It's not the type of shade that I have been drawn to this past month, and I was wearing a lot of green over the past 2 months prior of June, and I just was over them, I guess, so this was just not the shade that I wanted to reach for. But in total with the shade I have 5 uses, and I'm still quite far away from pan, but as you can see I have a tiny dip in here, but yeah, I think this again will be a shade that I will focus in a couple of months time rather than now when we are in summer. Then the final palette that I'm going to talk about is one that I have the 2 final shades in. I'm going to cover up a shade because I am actually panning that in my Pantastic Eyeshadows, which I will update in my next video. But the 2 last shades is the shade Gemoya and Suba, and Gemoya is the silver like right here, and I have used this one time in the past month for a total of 2 uses, so not too like much, and I think I'm quite far away from pan with this one, but I just have to focus on it. But I'm actually panning another silver in my whole collection product palette at the moment, and I've been focusing on that one rather than this one. And then the last shade is Suba, which is this kind of pinky gold shifty shade right here. It's actually a beautiful shimmer shade, and I was hoping to actually have pan on this this update, but with this one I only used the foundation 3 times for a total of 4 uses, so that's obviously not enough for pan. But I do have a little bit of disturbance in this pan, I'm hoping you can see there, and yeah, I think I might focusing on this more in the next month, but I keep saying that every month, so we'll see. But I really want to start working some shades in this out, because one of my goals, or kind of unofficial goal, is to have pan in every shade in this palette, because I have so many pans already. So I do kind of want to focus on that shade, and it's a beautiful shimmer that I have really fallen in love with over the past month, although I only used it 3 times. So that is all the eyeshadows that I have in this project, and this past month I hit an additional 3 pans in this project, which is really good. And I currently have 12 eyeshadows left in this project, so technically I have to hit 2 pans on average each month to hit my goal by the end of the year. And kind of judging from my previous months, I don't think that's going to be an issue, although I do have a few shades that I think will give me maybe a bit of a hard time. For example, Orange Soda from the Glam palette, maybe even Untamed from the Subculture palette, and things like that. I think those will be a bit of a challenge to pan on, but I do think I can do it, and I'm really hopeful that I will finish this product up before the end of the year. And when I started I wasn't really sure, because 26 eyeshadows is quite a lot, especially when you focus on all of them at the same time, but I am happy with where I am with all of them. And with that, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye guys!